One of our first interviews began as follows. The interviewer rang the doorbell, the door was flung open, and he was rounded on by the old lady saying, "That's about time. For 50 years we were not allowed to speak," unquote. These interviews were like opening a can of worms. Regularly, we, the interviewers, were barraged with an intense outburst of words. As a consequence, we, the interviewers, were often left behind with intense emotions, so-called counter-transference reactions. That's a term from psychoanalysis. That meant we, the interviewers, often felt run over, bulldozed, emptied, sickened, or confused in the course of an interview. In the nights following an interview, often haunted by nightmares, by violent nightmares, two of the few interviews that were conducted by students resulted in the young people having crying fits. Another student became sort of infected with the fascination that the interviewee had experienced for Hitler. Because of this toxic quality of most of the narratives, we discontinued working with student interviewers. We just couldn't do this any longer out of ethical reasons. It was too damaging. But we did continue our research with a core group of those 10 well-experienced interviewers, all members of the first post-World War II generation. With peer counseling and team counseling, we carefully observed and analyzed our countertransference reactions because they contain important information about us, about the interviews, but also about the hidden stories. This method of qualitative research was established by ethnologist Georges Devereux. Now, one of the most noticeable reactions we experienced consisted of shame. That came very surprising to us. We, the interviewers, often left an interview feeling ashamed. Now, what did that mean? What did shame have to do with National Socialism? We had actually never thought about that before. So as a next step, we informed ourselves about shame. And now I want to give you some basic information about shame before I return to the interviews. Just a rough summary, but I'm sorry, we have to go through this before, because otherwise the interview doesn't make much sense, or it makes less sense. So, are you ready for this? Okay. So what is shame? In his novel entitled Shame, Salman Rushdie, the one with the satanic verses, Salman Rushdie writes, quote, "Imagine shame as a liquid. Let's say it's like a sweet drink that you get from a drink dispenser. You just push the right button and a cup plops down under a spurt of the liquid," unquote. I'd like to illustrate this. But what happens if there's too much shame? Oops. Don't worry. No problem. Most societies have taken care of this problem. They have identified a group of society who takes care of the problem. Their job it is to sort of soak up the shame which is too much. Their job is it to sort of embody the shame which is too much. And we don't have a good opinion of these people. So, let's go on. Everything's fine. The water is away. So, the author is describing in this book how a parent's shame is being bottled into this infant's soul. Salman Rushdie describes a birth scene. The father, patriarch and militarist, reacts with rage and despise at the news that his firstborn child is only a girl, only a girl. At this, the infant girl blushes. She is ashamed right from her birth. This girl grows up, mentally handicapped, and later becomes a murderer. would like to speak briefly about the psychology of shame, based on the works of Leon Wurmser, Michael Hilgers, Michael Lewis, Alan Shore, Donald Nathanson, and others. So, shame is universal. We have all experienced it, although in different ways and different intensities. It is different for men and women and has different cultural characteristics. Although shame is painful, it does have three healthy aspects. Healthy shame regulates belonging, so that we know how to act appropriately and not cause embarrassment. If I would have come here with my swimsuit, it would not have been appropriate. You see? I would not have, you would have. That's just an example for that. But also, healthy shame protects our boundaries and limits with others, defining what is private, what is public. How much of ourselves can we allow to disclose in a given situation or keep to ourselves? If I would read from my personal journal, that would not be appropriate either. This is something that belongs to me, not in the public. And also, healthy shame protects our integrity, so that we know how to act in accordance with our conscience, values, and ideals, so we can look at ourselves in the mirror tomorrow. But if there is too much shame, it may become pathological. This is like drowning in shame, being flooded by feelings of unworthiness. And we often see this negative aspect of shame. There is too much. But we often are not aware about these subtle ways that everyday life is regulated by these three positive aspects of shame. Shame may be triggered when we forfeit belonging, when we do no longer belong to our family group or society because we didn't fulfill their expectations or ideals. If we have not been good enough or smart enough or young enough or whatever. For example, in Germany, traditionally weakness is regarded as shameful, such as being poor, being unemployed, lacking of education, having debts, being dependent, living on charity, and many, many others. All these are reasons to feel ashamed. Being weak. Second, shame is triggered when our physical or psychological boundaries have been trespassed, when our space has been violated. This is the shame of the victims. Typically, survivors of rape or torture are left behind with immense shame feelings. Third, shame is triggered when we have lost our integrity because we violated our conscience, when we have been trespassers to others. This is the shame of the trespassers, of the perpetrators. Now, the precursors of shame develop from the early communication between child and parent. So it develops very, very early. It begins very early. This, and very important, is the communication between parents and child, infant, which takes place mainly through body and eye contact. The kind of eye contact that the child experiences is later internalized as the view of oneself, whether we see ourselves in appreciative or disdaining ways. Infants have an intense need for communication, a need to see and be seen, to fascinate and to be fascinated. The child is seeking to be mirrored in the shining eyes of its parents, as Kohut states. We all know children, how they come into the world and have this curious, seeking look. You know what I mean? We all know that.